sodium family of tissue salts. So the homeopaths knew that due to the processing of salt, which gave us the umbrella process white table salt, would be a disaster. So they knew 100 years ago that sodium chloride would be the most prescribed homeopathic remedy in the materia medica. And in fact, today, sodium chloride, Nat Mur, is probably the most commonly prescribed homeopathic remedy in the world today, because the homeopaths knew that we would have a salt toxicity and a salt deficiency due to the processing of the salt, creating the white table salt, which is no better than the processed white sugar. Those are the white things that are killing us today. So the homeopaths absolutely knew how important that Nat Mur would be as we go forward and take a look at that remedy. But generally speaking, when we think sodium, of course, we're always making the connection to the moon. The moon governs the water. So wherever sodium goes, water goes. They go hand in hand. And just remember, the moon, sodium, water, emotions. Water in the emotions. So this is why Nat Mur is probably, out of all the homeopathic remedies to deal with the emotional turbulence, the emotional hurts, the emotional griefs, and all the emotional baggage and dramas and traumas of life, at some point in time, sodium chloride, Nat Mur, will be indicated. So this is why it's such a popular remedy. But generally speaking, when we think sodium, sodium sets the table for the electrical grid in the body. So when they say electrolytes, electrolytes are the movement of the electrons. The electrons are the molecules of emotions that generate every physiological function in the body. And that's because it generates an action potential. So just to reiterate, an action potential is every time our heart beats, every time we think, blink, eat, secrete, do anything, it's because of an action potential. And an action potential is because of sodium flooding in, potassium leaving. And of course, we always have to reset that sodium potassium grid. And that's a result of the sodium potassium ATPases, i.e. the sodium potassium pumps, which are absolutely magnesium dependent, because magnesium needs that ATP to pump the sodium back out of the cell and pump the potassium back into the cell. Needs an energy. We're swimming upstream when we're kicking out the sodium and putting the potassium back in. And that energy is ATP, and that ATP must have a magnesium ion bound to it. So this is why the Fab Four, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, run the electrical grid. So this is part of the electrolyte. Understanding this, understanding sodium. Sodium and potassium, they're the great solvent minerals that dissolve all the ions, keeping them in solution. And when sodium, potassium run low, then the ions, specifically calcium, precipitate out of solution that become the deposition diseases. And those deposition diseases are all our aging diseases. And eventually the end game of that is rigor mortis. That's when all the calcium is released and magnesium is no longer there to oppose the calcium, hence the full-blown contraction, which we call rigor mortis. So sodium is a huge player in the electrical grid, in the electrolyte. So this is why we have to have a deeper understanding of sodium. And when we think of sodium, when we think of astrology, we got to remember the three modes in astrology: cardinal, fixed, mutable. Okay, so cardinal in Latin is the opening. It's the opening of the door, and that's the opening of the season. So as we open up the season, we have the cardinal signs, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Libra, and Aries. Those are the four cardinal signs. Then the four fixed signs, that's when the seasons become fixed. Then the seasons are going to change. They become mutable. So the four fixed signs in astrology is Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, SALT. salt is fixed in the stars because it's the salt of our salvation. As above, so below. So we need to understand the importance of sodium, that sodium water emotional connection, because we are the salt of the earth. This is why we throw salt over the left shoulder, because that's the emotional side, the heart side, connecting us to the emotions. So we know that salt is an electrolyte. Electrolytes move the current. Current is currency. Currency is money. That's why they use the term salarium, which is a term for called salt money. That's where we get salary out of that term. And that's where they used to pay back in the day. They used to pay people with salt because it is currency. And in that currency comes from the current of these electrolytes generating the electrons, which are the molecules of emotions that generate every physiological reaction in the body. So in fact, the secret in chemistry is the movement of electrons. So sodium is such a huge player. Now let's take a look at the tissue salts. I think I've rambled on. I digressed for just a minute, but we have to understand the importance of sodium when we're looking at how to balance out the mineral matrix. We got to understand the energy. We got to understand the water, moon, emotion connection, because that sodium won't go anywhere until we make the bigger connections to understand the energetics behind it. NatMur. NatMur is Natrum Muriaticum, which is sodium chloride. So muriaticum is always chloride. So as I alluded to earlier, that sodium would be the most prescribed homeopathic remedy in all of homeopathy in the world today, for which it's either number 1 or number 2 today. So we know that NatMur, sodium chloride, has everything to do with the water. Wherever sodium goes, water goes. So when we see excess water build up, that would be, you know, the fluid retention, that would be the bloating, that would be the edemas, the swelling, that would be the puffy eyelids, that would be the lymph congestion that starts to get, you know, inflamed and swollen. So it has everything to do with the water in excess. And then when that water in excess becomes dry, then we're dealing with all the dryness of this remedy. That dryness may appear at the dry skin. That could be, we can't produce the water in the eyes, the tears, and then the eyes start to form a lot of crustaceans. That will be the dryness in the skin, the dryness in the mouth, the cracked lips, the cracks in the tongue. So very common prescription for NatMur is when you see cracked lips, especially on the lower lip, that is always indicative of NatMur. So you will see a lot of dryness, or just the opposite, a lot of water retention. So you're going to see the two extremes in this remedy. So in the dryness, you may see constipation. That constipation is where that stool is like rock hard, and that can actually cause tearing and bleeding. So you'll see the dry mouth, the dry lips, the constipation, the cold sores, the blisters, those canker sores, those very, very irritating canker sores, you know, putting salt on the wound. So when we see those canker sores and those blisters and those herpes outbreaks, we're thinking NatMur. When people are having salt cravings, we're seeing NatMur as a highly indicated remedy. It also has a lot to do with this deep grief, never well since a broken heart. And this reminds me of my sister, who was in a relationship in which she was madly in love and life was good and she was at her best. And then all of a sudden she found out the love of her life had cheated on her, and she was absolutely devastated. She was down for the count. She was never the same since that broken heart. That was probably about, 35 years ago or so. And she's never been well since that broken heart, a completely different sister. Hope she doesn't watch this video, but to get that point. And so when the broken heart happened, she lost trust in men. She didn't believe in love anymore. And so she went about her life, became successful in business, but shut out that emotional part to her life. And today we just ran a hair analysis on her, and I told her she probably will have a calcium shell, and her calcium shell was a shell of 500 plus. And so that's when we become walled off. We see the brick wall in physical form, that calcium shell, just putting up the brick after brick, walling us off from the emotions of the heart. Because before there ever is a physical bleed in the heart, there's always the emotional bleed. So when we're thinking Nat Mur, we're thinking the deep griefs, the never well since a broken heart. And these are the type of individuals that do not do well when you console them or comfort them. They want to kind of mask in their misery on their own. They don't want to talk about it, but yet they'll cry when they hear sentimental songs on the radio, or they're attracted to those kind of songs that are feeling their emotions that they can't express. So we'll see a lot of affinity for mucous membranes, and we'll see this dryness. We'll see, again, the opposite of the dryness is the excess fluid accumulation. So again, when we see that bloating and we see the swelling in the ankles, or we see, the loss of blood flow into the digits with the cold fingers, cold hands, cold feet, we're thinking Nat Mur, because the blood isn't moving and the extremities feel that coldness. And that coldness is really emanating from, we block the heart center. And so this is probably your number one headache remedy, because sodium chloride is needed for the blood, for that whole water element. And so when there is a toxicity of the sodium chloride or a deficiency of sodium chloride, the blood won't move and flow like the river it was meant to flow, and that can result in a lot of headaches. So when we see temporal headaches, frontal headaches, headaches like little hammers, headaches with photophobia, the migraines, or as the Brits like to say, the migraines. So migraine, great headache remedy. So again, it's got affinity for the temporals, for the front of the head, for the eyes, for the little pounding hammers in the head. So great, wonderful remedy for headaches. Number one remedy of all the tissue salts, Nat Mur is number one for headaches. And just generally speaking, in homeopathy, it's got to be a top 10 headache remedy in all of homeopathy. So this tissue salt, Nat Mur, is ruled by the zodiac sign Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer, so it's the water carrier. So it's carrying the water, it's carrying the emotions of the water. And so this remedy is wonderful for, just think mucous membrane, skin, think headaches. And again, when you're thinking skin, it could be the dry skin, the wrinkly skin, it could be the bloated skin, it could be the puffiness under the eyes, it could be the cracks in the tongues, the cracks in the lips, the herpes outbreaks. All of this has to do with Nat Mur. So it is a beautiful remedy. And again, we're going to see that constipation, we're going to see that depression, we're going to see that craving of salt foods. So we're going to see a lot of that Nat Mur energy in the patient profile. All right, let's move on to the next tissue salt, Nat Phos. Nat Phos is sodium phosphate. This is the homeopathic antacid. This is the Tums for the tummy. So any acid condition, think Nat Phos. So every blood test that I run, I always see a high anion gap. A high anion gap means that we don't have enough cations. We got too many anions, too many acids. And so we know that the body does not have an acid reserve. It has an alkaline reserve. It has an alkaline reserve to deal with the byproducts of metabolism, produces the acids. the lactic acid, the uric acid, the phosphoric acid, the oxalic acid. So we produce acids, but the body should be able to deal with these acids. When it can't, then they'll build up. We'll see it as a lot of stomach, digestion issues, that acid reflux, that GERD, that heartburn. We'll see the acidity, affecting our mind. We become, kind of depressed. We have low self-esteem. We feel ugly. We don't feel, the best that we should, because we feel that acid. That acid can go into the joints, that uric acid in the joints, that lactic acid in the muscles, those oxalate acids in the kidneys. So this is a great acid remedy. And of course, it's ruled by the zodiac sign Libra. Libra is the scales of balance, ruled by the planet Venus. So the ultimate job, well, Libra is ruled by Venus, but Venus rules the kidneys. So the ultimate job of the kidneys is to balance out the acid base, where you can't be too basic, can't have too many bases, to be too alkaline, you can't have too many acids, too acidic. There has to be that fine balance between acid and base, and that's the ultimate function of the kidneys, is to keep acids and base in balance. And when we come too acidic, that's going to be very harsh on the kidneys, because they're going to have to deal with the uric acid, the phosphoric acid, the lactic acid, and that will scar the little tubules in the kidneys. So this is a great kidney remedy. It's a great joint remedy. It's a great acid remedy. So let's think: digestive tract, all eating type of disorders, gas, bloating, indigestion, heartburn, great morning sickness remedy with the pregnant women, stiffness and swelling of joints, that could be the uric acid, lactic acid, etc. Colicky infants who vomit curdled milk. That's a key note for those infants when we see that. We just prescribe the Nat Phos. Natrum Phosphate is a wonderful tissue salt to deal with the acids, to deal with the water element. So it works well with Nat Mur, sodium chloride, and Nat Phos. So you can pair up the natrums together, because they're going to have that great affinity for the water element. So this is a wonderful remedy that I love to employ. All right, we'll move on to the next of the sodium family. Let's see what we got next. Nat Sulf, sodium sulfate. When I think of this remedy, I think the head number one. Never well since a head trauma, a concussion. So how many people in this world do we know have had concussions or head traumas? Maybe not all of them have been never well since, but when we see we had a concussion and then that shut off whatever part of the body, and since that concussion, we've had digestive issues. Since that concussion, we've had depression. Since that concussion, we used to be extroverted, now we're more introverted. In fact, back in my day school days, I knew of wasn't quite a friend, but was an acquaintance in school. And he was a very outgoing, he was a great athlete, great ice skater, very personable, very lovable. So he was like the people's champion back in my grade school days. Everyone wanted to be like him. And then he was in a ice skating accident in which he got a concussion. I wasn't there, so I didn't see it, but heard about it through the grapevine. And then he had missed about a month of school since that accident. When he came back, he was never the same ever since. Instead of being the extroverted, he became the introvert. He was the great athlete, no longer competed in sports. And so he completely changed. This remedy would have been perfect for him to help with reconnection of the energy in the brain of never well since a head trauma. So this is how I think of this remedy. It's a great liver remedy. And when we think we want a liver support, a liver organ support remedy, we may think, chelidonium, lycopodium, arsenic, phosphorus, nux vomica, and we're also thinking Nat Sulf. This is a wonderful liver remedy. And as I had previously alluded to in the other tissue salts, whenever you see the sulfur, you're thinking that sulfation, and with that sulfation, we're thinking the liver. Now, in this instance, the Nat Sulph is not going to be so much yellow, it's going to be more yellow-green. And so green is actually going to be more the predominating theme in this tissue salt. But it's also going to have a great affinity for the lungs. So when we get congestion in the liver, that may show itself as skin lesions, or it may show itself as congestion in the lung field, where we get the asthma, the bronchitises, and all that breathing stuff. So this helps to heal the mucous membranes. It helps to identify harmful versus beneficial substances, regulates the gut and the whole liver connection. So this is a wonderful fluid regulator working with the other natrums. It's a liver remedy, it's a jaundice remedy, it's an overindulgence hangover remedy, similar to that Nux vomica remedy. We're going to see more green discharges. We're going to see that asthma. And I love this one, like I said, for the head, for that never well since a head trauma. So this tissue salt, if you never had a head trauma, but you're experiencing liver issues or asthmas, we're thinking Nat Sulph. So we don't want to have prejudice and just become dogmatic and obstinate. We want to have that flexibility to see when we can get some of these key notes matching with the profile of the patient, so we can prescribe intelligently. So this tissue salt is ruled by Taurus. Remember, Aries rules the head and Taurus rules more the cerebellum, where Aries is the cerebrum, Taurus is more the cerebellum and face. So it's got this whole head face connection, and we see how that plays out. But again, you don't have to be born in Taurus for me to prescribe sodium sulfate. This is a wonderful, beautiful remedy. And when you think of how many people in this world have had some kind of a head trauma that may have never been well since that, think of this remedy. This is incredible little homeopathic tissue salt for many functions of the head, the liver, the lungs. That's how I like to look at this remedy. Now, we need to go back and look at magnesium. Somehow I passed up on my all-time favorite tissue salt, Mag PHOS. So in the tissue salts, we have 3 calciums, we have 3 sodiums, 3 potassiums. I would have also had 3 magnesiums. I would have had magnesium sulfate, I would have had magnesium chloride, and they're still main remedies in the materia medica, but for the tissue salt, Schuessler left the other 2 ones out, and Mag PHOS is an indispensable remedy all on its own. To me, it's the obligatory must-have arsenal in your toolbox, because this one is great for muscles and nerves, especially when you see women when they're going through that PMS and they got these uterine contractions. So this is your Midol, Tylenol, Advil. This will work better than any pharmaceutical over the counter to deal with those uterine contractions, to deal with the muscle spasms, to deal with that sciatic pain. This is a great nerve muscle tonic. It is absolutely wonderful, especially for hiccups. When people get these hiccups, and the most annoying little thing is the hiccups, you could start popping these, and you may have to take them every 5 minutes, but eventually within 15-20 minutes, you're going to notice those hiccups gone after really going aggressive with this. Now, when we see those uterine contractions or that sciatica, you may have to dose yourself every 45 minutes, and it works well with warmth. So this remedy loves heat. So when we see better with heat, we're thinking Mag PHOS. So we don't want to, again, have that, obstinate approach where it's got to be ice. You got to put ice on it. There's times when a patient will want heat as opposed to ice. So we want to, have that flexibility to see what is the patient craving and needing. Most of the time in acute injury, they're going to want ice. They're going to want to put out the inflammation. But in more chronic type of injuries, when we see a chronic re-aggravation of a chronic injury, ice may be the worst thing for them. And so when we think Mag Phos, it's better with heat, you know, that back pain, they want to churn up the showers, you know, that hot water hitting that back area. So this is great for a lot of those sharp pains that come and go, including headaches. So when we see the headaches that, you know, just are these nagging headaches, Mag Phos can be a wonderful go-to. So we love this remedy for many things, but I think of it mostly as muscles and nerves. And of course, it's ruled by the zodiac sign Leo. Leo is the heart, right in the center, 3 chakras above, 3 chakras below. So it's at the center of our universe. And no coincidence that most of the magnesium utilized in the body is going to the heart and the brain, because that has the most electrical activity of, you know, very excitable tissues. So we're producing a lot of energy, and where energy is, mitochondria are, and the more mitochondria are, the more ATP, the more magnesium. So this is a huge heart remedy. And so Leo fits that theme perfectly. So I love Mag Phos. To me, one of the most indispensable tissue remedies, great for again, think muscle aches and pains, think nerves, from sciatica to toothaches to any type of nerve overexcitement. I'm thinking Mag Phos, and it works well putting it in warm water. A great go-to remedy, and works well with Calc Phos and Kali Phos as an amazing nerve tonic. Let's see if I missed anything. Great PMS remedy for those uterine cramps, for neuralgias, for tension headaches, for angina, and all that type of stuff. So again, this probably is my favorite tissue salt of them all, just as magnesium is probably my favorite mineral of all, because it's the quarterback in the mineral matrix. It runs the show. And so when magnesium starts to go low in the body, that's where we're not creating the ATP, we're not balancing out the calcium, we're not running the sodium potassium pumps. So this is an absolute divine tissue salt that, again, is #1 in my book. All right, I believe I rattled on long enough. We will move on.